The snow fell without mercy on the Colorado mountains, turning the winding road into a treacherous white serpent. Daniel Harris's hands clenched the steering wheel of his pickup truck, straining to see as the wipers waged a losing war against the blinding snow. Next to him, Ranger's ears shot back flat against his head. The shepherd's entire body went rigid with an instinctual dread, and then Daniel saw it. A police cruiser half swallowed by a snowbank, its driver's side door ripped brutally from its hinges, and there collapsed against the back tire was a female officer, her uniform stained crimson, her lips forming a silent, desperate prayer. Between the brutal cold of a mountain winter and a dying officer's final plea, a father was about to learn that the most dangerous path is sometimes the only one worth taking. Daniel Harris had chosen this isolation with the same tactical precision a soldier uses to fortify a position, analyzing every angle, every approach, and every possible threat. The cabin stood 17 long miles from Cedar Falls, Colorado, down a dirt track so unforgiving that most delivery trucks wouldn't dare attempt it even on a clear day. He'd purchased the land 6 years ago using Maria's life insurance, a bitter truth that their daughter's safety was born from her mother's death. The 3-bedroom log home sat on 40 acres of pine forest and sprawling meadow, just far enough from the world for Lily to grow up before its sharp edges could cut her too deeply too soon. At 36, Daniel moved with the quiet, disciplined efficiency that defined career soldiers. 6 long years had passed since he buried Maria. 6 years of trying to be both father and mother to a little girl who asked heartbreaking questions about why mommy couldn't visit just for a little while from heaven. Lily had been just 13 months old when the cancer finally won its 18-month war. Far too young to recall her mother's infectious laugh that filled every room, or the way she would dance in the kitchen as she cooked, turning the simple act of cooking into a celebration. Their isolation served many purposes. It shielded them from the suffocating pity of well-meaning neighbors and their hollow platitudes about God's plan, which made Daniel want to scream that this plan left a child without her mother and a husband utterly gutted by grief. It gave them space for their unconventional life, for homeschooling done at kitchen tables and in forest clearings, lessons in survival skills taught alongside math tables, and nightly stories about Maria kept her memory alive, free from the sorrow of gravestone visits. Daniel earned a living as a technical writer for outdoor equipment companies. His military past lent an undeniable authenticity to his work. It paid well enough, and since it was remote, it demanded just enough focus to keep his mind from the dark places that called to him on anniversaries and random Tuesdays when Lily would tilt her head just like Maria. Lily Marie Harris was 7 years and 9 months old, a fact she would state to anyone who asked with absolute mathematical precision. She had her mother's gentle features wrapped firmly around her father's steel spine, a combination that created a child who was both deeply compassionate and astonishingly resilient. Under Daniel's tutelage, she could name 43 bird species by sight or sound, tie 8 distinct knots, including a Swiss seat rappelling harness, ignite a flame with flint and steel in under 2 minutes, and skillfully dress a wound using supplies from their med kit. This wasn't the fearful foresight of a survivalist, but the vital teaching of a father who knew that knowledge forged true confidence. A child who could master the wilderness would never feel powerless in the so-called civilized world. A girl who knew how to protect herself would move through the world with a strength others never would. These skills were an invisible armor, her greatest defense. Ranger had entered their little family 3 years before, hand-delivered by Master Sergeant Jim Rodriguez himself, Daniel's old squad leader who drove 14 hours from Fort Carson to ensure the introduction was done right. The 5-year-old German Shepherd had served 2 tours in Afghanistan, sniffing out hidden bombs, saving countless lives before the scars of war. The blasts and gunfire made him unfit for active duty. "He's like you," Rodriguez had told him, as he watched Ranger instantly stand between Lily and the stranger. "Done his duty, paid his dues. He needs quiet now, but that instinct never leaves. It just needs a new purpose." And the dog found his purpose in Lily becoming her guardian, with an unwavering, singular devotion. When she climbed trees, he'd circle the base a nervous sentinel below. And when she finally slept, he'd lie across her doorway, a living shield against any threat, real or imagined. When a delivery truck rumbled up the drive, Ranger would place his body between Lily and the strangers. He relaxed only at Daniel's all clear, a signal they'd practiced hundreds of times. The mail carrier now left packages at the gate, unwilling to challenge the shepherd's fierce devotion. Officer Kate Miller embodied the very life Daniel had consciously abandoned. The duty, the service, the crushing weight of other people's lives. At 28, she moved with the hard-won confidence of a woman who clawed for every bit of respect in a force run by men who saw a woman before they ever saw a cop. 3 years on the Cedar Falls police force had twisted the meaning of protect and serve for her. It meant different things for different people, and that the most serious threats were not on the streets, but inside the precinct itself. Kate was raised in Cedar Falls, her childhood built on small-town ideals she would later learn were more of a comforting myth than a hard reality. Her father owned Miller's Hardware for 30 years, offering credit to families who fell on hard times, organizing fundraisers for medical bills. The very community spirit she believed the police force should embody. Her mother was a third-grade teacher at Cedar Falls Elementary, the very school Lily might have attended had Daniel trusted a traditional education. Kate left for the University of Colorado filled with grand dreams of actually changing the world, only to return with the simpler goal of protecting her own small corner of it. The department's corruption revealed itself slowly, like rust bleeding through fresh paint. It began when she saw another officer pocketing cash taken from a recent drug bust. She reported it to Sergeant Williams, who casually explained that evidence just gets misplaced sometimes, and that she had better learn the difference between seeing and witnessing. Undeterred the second time, she went directly to Lieutenant Morrison, who listened intently, took down notes, and then punished her with solo night patrols in Riverside Cedar Falls' most dangerous neighborhood. The message was unmistakable. Silence was her only shield. But Kate was forged from her father's resolve and her mother's strategic mind. If the very system was poisoned, she would chronicle its decay until the evidence itself cried out for justice. 3 months of secret recordings of photographing forbidden files in the dead of night, copying data when the station fell silent. She had filled a single drive with a decade's worth of corruption enough to bring it all crashing down. Officers and officials lined their pockets, while the very community they had sworn an oath to defend paid a terrible price in addiction violence and broken trust. The ambush was sprung on Highway 50, that winding mountain pass Cedar Falls' only link to the world. A calculated slam from behind sent her cruiser fishtailing helplessly into the snowbank, followed by swift, brutal purpose. A knife between the ribs missing vital organs by just inches, a wound designed to be blamed on the wreckage. They had been clever choosing a night when the blizzard would bury all their secrets. Her death was meant to be another roadside tragedy, but somehow Kate had managed to pull herself from the wreckage. The crash had silenced her radio. Her cell phone was swallowed by the mangled steel. Her very life was draining away with each weakening pulse. She collapsed at the road's edge, her fight nearly over. The crucial USB drive was clutched in her freezing, numb fingers. Then through the swirling snow came headlights, a pickup truck slowing to a stop, and a man stepped out his movements, speaking of someone who intimately understood violence. Daniel approached the crushed cruiser with tactical awareness, checking his angles, assessing every threat. His body reacting with muscle memory from places where stopping to help was an invitation for ambush. Seeing her uniform, his immediate instinct was to call for help. But her desperate clutch on his wrist stopped him completely. "Please," she whispered, her breath a fading mist in the frozen air. "Don't call it in. They'll kill us both." The gaping wound in her side was no accident. It screamed of a deliberate, violent act. Without hesitation, Daniel's hands moved with skilled precision. Combat medical training, deeply ingrained, took over. He applied pressure, his mind calculating every distance, options and contingencies. Ranger began a low, steady growl, his eyes fixed on the curve of the road where fresh tracks told of a hasty departure. Evidence, Kate breathed out, pressing the blood-slick USB into his palm with the last of her strength. It's all on there. 3 months of recordings, documents, proof. The chief, at least 15 other officers, probably more. They're running narcotics out of evidence, selling off confiscated firearms, taking bribes to sabotage cases. The entire department is rotten. Daniel's decision was made in the space of a single heartbeat. He lifted Kate into his arms, her weight almost nothing, after years spent hauling 40-pound rucksacks through the Afghan mountains. Inside the truck's warm cab, Ranger immediately positioned himself beside the injured officer, offering his body heat and a reassuring presence. Daniel drove on with controlled urgency. He understood that reckless speed on these roads meant joining her cruiser in a frozen ditch. Too little, and she could bleed out before they managed to reach shelter. The cabin emerged through the storm like a page from Lily's storybooks, its windows glowing with the amber warmth of firelight. Smoke rose from the chimney, disappearing into the white chaos overhead as Daniel rushed Kate through the door. He called out, preparing his daughter for their guest. Lily then appeared at the top of the stairs, a small figure in purple pajamas, clutching the stuffed rabbit, her one constant friend since her mother's death. "Daddy, why is the police lady hurt?" "She's had an accident, sweetheart. Remember what we discussed, that sometimes people really need our help, and we are the only ones here who can give it." Lily nodded gravely, then slipped back into her bedroom, reappearing moments later with the first aid kit her father had given her for Christmas. It held real supplies in kid-sized packs. He believed in readying her for reality, not hiding it. She stayed right beside him as he tended to Kate's wound, bringing clean towels and hot water without being told. Her little face was a mask of intense focus and deep concern. "You are so brave," Kate told her, forcing a weak smile through waves of pain. "What's your name?" "Lily Marie Harris. I'm 7 3/4. Ranger is 5, but that is 35 in dog years, so he's actually older than Daddy. Even if Daddy is the boss, are you gonna be okay? My dad fixed a guy once who was hurt worse than you. He had a hole clean through his leg, and my daddy saved his life with only his medical kit and some fishing line." Her innocent chatter couldn't hide the deep fear Daniel saw in her eyes, or how she kept glancing at the blood trying not to, or the white-knuckled grip she kept on her rabbit. Kate's arrival had shattered the fragile bubble of safety they'd built, dragging the violence of the outside world into their sanctuary. After Daniel sent Lily upstairs to get ready for bed, a simple routine upheld in the face of these incredible circumstances, Kate revealed the full, awful scope of her discovery. The corruption started small, with officers skimming cash from drug busts, but it had grown into something systemic. Chief Morrison ran it all like a corporation with its own distribution networks, its own accounting, and an enforcement arm for anyone who dared to threaten the operation. "They have leverage on everybody." Kate said, a fever building in her despite Daniel's urgent medical care. Blackmail threats, financial ruin. Some officers joined willingly for the pay. The others were coerced. One officer's daughter required an experimental cancer treatment his insurance refused to cover. They gave him an impossible choice: join them and afford the treatment, or stay clean and watch his little girl die. What would you do? Daniel looked up to the stairs where Lily had gone, understanding the awful mathematics of a parent's desperation. "I'd like to think I would find another way." Everyone thinks that right up until they're faced with the actual choice, until it is your child who is dying, and someone offers you a lifeline, even one that is covered in blood. Ranger's sudden alertness came a full 30 seconds before the sound of engines. His training took over a ridge of fur raising on his spine, a low growl building deep in his chest. Daniel moved to the window, his eyes counting headlights in the storm. 3 sets of headlights climbed his private road with cold intent. This was no coincidence. They were being hunted, tracked by some new age tech he couldn't fathom, or by an old world hunter who simply read the story in his tires. "Take Lily and go." Kate fought to her feet, her hand trembling from fever and the life she was losing reaching for her weapon. I'll hold them off. Buy you time. You can barely stand, let alone aim. Daniel was already in motion. Muscle memory born from a harsher life. From his closet came the rifle and the go bag that was always ready cash documents, medical supplies, and ammunition. A relic from a former life where being ready was the only thing that separated a return from a final homecoming. Lily appeared in her doorway, already in her snow gear, a child's instinct sensing the encroaching evil. The bad men are coming. Maybe honey. Remember our forest game? The one where we pretend to be quiet little foxes hiding in the trees? She nodded, pulling on her boots with a chilling efficiency that shattered his heart. No 7-year-old should know this kind of drill. So ready to vanish into a storm. But the world never cared about what should be, only what is. They ghosted out the back, just as headlights swept across the front of the cabin. Ranger plunged ahead, their loyal guide, into a wilderness he knew by heart. Daniel bore Kate's weight a fireman's carry for the woman he had to save, while Lily clung to him, her arms a desperate anchor around his neck. The storm raged, wind lashing snow sideways, erasing their tracks the instant they were made. But it also blinded them, shrinking the world to just a few feet. Behind them, beams of light probed the cabin windows like grasping fingers. Voices sliced through the gale, crisp, organized, lethal. This was not the local law on an overtime shift. This was a tactical team armed with a mission and the brutal training to see it through. This path, treacherous by day, turned malevolent in the storm's dark heart. Daniel moved by memory, by the very soul of the woods, occasionally consulting the military compass he always carried. But true north was less important than the map etched into his mind, every stone and hollow between here and their only hope for sanctuary. Kate stumbled constantly, each apology a whisper of her failing strength, while Lily had fallen terrifyingly quiet. Her face was pressed into Daniel's back, a muffled hitching sob, the only proof she was still awake. After barely a half mile, the sound of pursuit changed the engine rumble, giving way to the high whine of snowmobiles. Daniel's mind raced his options, shrinking by the second. The abandoned ranger station was still 2 miles distant. Kate was fading fast, and Lily was nearing that terrible threshold where the cold ceases to be a feeling and becomes a final verdict. Change of plans. He managed, cutting from the path toward massive boulders he and Lily explored the summer before. Baby girl, remember our discovery? The arrowhead and the cave where the bears once slept. Her voice came as a faint whisper against his coat. That's right. We're going to hide there. It was not really a cave, more a deep scar in the rock, carved by time itself, but it was their only chance against the wind and the falling snow. Daniel gently lowered Kate onto dry ground under the stone ledge, then began carving snow to desperately build a protective windbreak. Lily joined in her tiny hands, a blur of desperate motion, as Ranger faithfully took his post at the entrance, his ears swiveling to catch any sound in the gale. The snowmobiles were drawing perilously closer. Their lights flickered through the trees like phantom flames. Daniel made a choice, a tactical move that warred with every fatherly instinct, a silent scream in his soul. I have to draw them away, he told Kate, his hands checking the magazine on her weapon. Can you protect Lily no matter what? Kate nodded weakly. They both knew she was barely holding on to consciousness, let alone fight back. Daniel knelt down before his daughter, his heart aching, cupping her face in his hands, etching every feature into his memory as if for the last time. Listen to me, sweetheart. I have to make the bad men follow me away from you. You stay right here with Miss Kate and Ranger. Don't you move until I call. And no matter what happens, be my brave girl, okay? I don't want you to go. Tears cut trails down her wind-burned cheeks. I know, baby. But sometimes protecting family means running right at the danger instead of running away. Ranger will keep you safe, and I promise I'll be back. He kissed her forehead, a timeless gesture between a parent and child, a blessing of love, a promise in a single touch. Then he was gone. Swallowed by the storm, the rifle slung across his back, moving to cut off their search pattern before it reached the shelter. Daniel swung out wide, using the contours of the land to hide his approach, waiting for a clear view of the pursuing team. 4 figures in tactical police gear, their faces masked by balaclavas. Night vision goggles sat uselessly on their helmets in the blizzard. One man held a thermal imager, sweeping it methodically across the forest. That was the real danger, the greatest threat. Body heat would flare against the frozen backdrop. He began to move with a lethal, silent precision. Daniel slipped in behind the last rider, waiting for that perfect instant when the wind and engine roar would cover his advance. It was swift, brutal. The rider was unconscious before he hit the unforgiving ground. Daniel used restraints from the vest to bind the man's wrists and ankles. Then he destroyed the thermal imager with his rifle butt. "Contact north, he's on the run," Daniel yelled, intentionally distorting his voice to mislead them, sending the other 3 riders racing toward the empty forest. He simply melted back into the storm. He circled back to the overhang, where 3 pairs of frightened eyes saw him appear out of the white chaos. Kate was barely conscious, her skin on fire with fever. Lily shivered violently, even with Ranger's warmth pressed against her. "We need to reach the ranger station," Daniel said, lifting Kate despite her faint protest. "It's our only chance." The abandoned ranger station was 2 miles northeast, a relic from when Forest Service patrols regularly moved through these vast, imposing mountains. Daniel found it during his first winter here, and had even taken shelter there during the darkest days after Maria's death, when facing Lily's innocent grief felt like drowning in his own failure to heal her pain. The structure stood solid, defying decades of neglect. Positioned on a ridge with clear sight lines in all directions, a truly defensible place. If it ever came to that final agonizing mile felt like an eternity. Time itself seemed to warp as Daniel powered through snowdrifts that swallowed him to the waist. Lily held onto his back, her small life depending on it. Her breaths were shallow, yet a steady rhythm of survival. Kate faded in and out, her whispers a fevered litany of evidence and betrayal, and a fragmented memory of her father's hardware store. Ahead, the ever-loyal Ranger forged a path where he could, his powerful frame carving a way through the snow, constantly circling back to watch over his family. Then, finally, the station materialized through the blinding storm, a dark, broken silhouette against the endless white. Its door clung to a single hinge, and snow bled through shattered window panes. But the stone fireplace stood strong, a silent promise of warmth. Daniel had stashed life-saving supplies here years before, emergency rations tablets to make the water pure, and a kit to mend the broken everything they would need. Even antibiotics acquired through less than official means always kept fresh and ready. He moved with a desperate, focused energy, jamming an old table against the broken door, stuffing their jackets into the gaping holes of the windows to fight the cold, and coaxing a flame from the dry wood stacked by some long-gone traveler. Kate's fever was raging her skin, a furnace even as violent shivers racked her body. Daniel ground the precious antibiotics into water, gently forcing her to drink past the weakness. By the growing fire, Lily huddled for warmth. Ranger pressed his warm body against her, and together they watched Daniel, their faith in him absolute, a belief he could make this right, that he could make them safe again. "Is she going to die, Daddy?" Lily's voice was a whisper against the howling dark. "Not on my watch, baby girl." But in the silence of his own heart, Daniel knew the odds were turning against them with every passing hour. Kate needed a real hospital, a surgeon's hands, resources he could never conjure in this forsaken shelter trapped by a blizzard. The flash drive felt like a lead weight in his pocket. Its secrets were worth more than just one life. They could save or shatter many. "But whose lives and at what terrible cost? Tell me everything," he urged Kate. His voice low, needing a map for the darkness ahead. "Who's in on this? How deep does the rot go?" Through the haze of fever and chattering teeth, Kate began to sketch a chilling portrait of corruption, one that stretched from the beat cop all the way to City Hall. Chief Morrison orchestrated it all with cold corporate precision, keeping meticulous records a testament to his chilling arrogance that he would never be brought to justice. The side deals alone were pulling in hundreds of thousands of dollars each month. And that was just the beginning of their enterprise. Seized weapons were sold back onto the streets. Evidence simply evaporated from lockers if the price was right. Countless cases collapsed as key files went missing. "Why not the feds?" Daniel pressed. "I tried," she whispered. "I made contact with an agent out of Denver. We were supposed to meet today. That must have been when they figured me out." A bitter laugh escaped her lips, followed by a cough that brought a stain of red. "The accident... It was all designed to look so terribly routine. An officer responding to a call on slick winter roads. So tragic. Nothing to see here. Not until you showed up." Ranger's growl cut through the silence, a low, constant rumble that was the sound of approaching doom. Through a crack in the barricade, Daniel saw the beams of flashlights cutting through the storm, a coordinated sweep encircling their fragile sanctuary. They had been found. But this time there was no escape, no place left to run. And Kate was fading, her grip on consciousness slipping away. Exhaustion and the biting cold were taking their toll on Lily, while the shrapnel buried in Daniel's shoulder screamed in protest against the harsh elements. "Daniel Harris." A voice boomed through the blizzard, magnified and distorted by a megaphone. Yet it was a voice so familiar it turned Daniel's blood to ice. "This is Detective Mark Evans. We need to talk." Mark Evans, his old brother-in-arms. The same man who had pulled him from the wreckage of a burning Humvee after an IED ripped their convoy apart. Who'd kept him from bleeding out for 3 endless hours until the medevac could land. Who had stood shoulder to shoulder with him at Maria's funeral, vowing he'd always have his back. It was Mark who gave Lily that stuffed rabbit, the one she clutched even now. "I know you're in there, brother. Let's end this peacefully. Just send out Officer Miller, hand over what she gave you, and you and your little girl can walk away. Nobody wants to see a child get hurt." It was a classic psychological tactic, clear as day. Forge a connection, offer a false way out, use their shared history as a weapon. But knowing the playbook didn't lessen the blow of the words. Not when they came from the man who had quite literally saved his life. Mark Daniel's own voice cut through the driving snow. "You know I can't do that. Sure you can. You were always the smart one, Daniel, the one who saw all the angles. Think about your daughter. She's already lost her mother. Don't make her an orphan for a fight that has nothing to do with you." The words hit Daniel with the crushing weight of an avalanche, as if the mountain itself was bearing down on his soul. Save others and expose the truth, risking Lily's future, or protect his daughter at the cost of justice for so many. The choice should have been easy, family above all, always. But then he heard Maria's voice echoing from the past. Her last lucid words a whisper before the morphine finally silenced her pain forever. "Promise me you'll raise her to be brave? To do what's right, especially when it's hard. You have 60 seconds to decide." Mark's voice crackled again. His voice crackled. "After that, we're coming in, and it won't be pretty. You know, I don't want that to happen, Daniel, but I have my orders." "Orders?" A bitter laugh escaped Daniel's lips. "Since when do you follow a rotten order, Mark? You remember Kandahar, that colonel ordering us to open fire on civilians. You told him he could court-martial you before you'd ever pull that trigger." Silence hung in the storm-filled air. Then Mark's voice came back quieter now, exhausted, and filled with the weight of 1,000 compromises. "That was war, Daniel. This is different." "No," Daniel shot back, "it's exactly the same. You're following an order you know is wrong because it's the easy way out. How many families have you ruined with that poison you're peddling? How many children have lost their parents to the very stuff you're putting on the streets 30 seconds? Daniel, don't make me do this. Do you remember that family in Kandahar? The one we found hiding in that bombed-out school? You said leaving them behind would haunt you forever. How many ghosts are following you now?" "Mark, time's up." Daniel's gaze fell to Lily, her small face glowing in the firelight, her trust in him absolute. He could see the fear in her wide eyes, but he knew this single moment would forge the woman she would become, shaping her very soul. It would teach her if standing up mattered when it felt impossible. If you want her, come and get her. Daniel challenged, his voice low as he checked the rifle's chamber. But remember, Mark, you taught me everything I know about urban warfare. Every tactical approach, every method for the breach. Are you really sure you want to test your own teachings? A gas canister crashed through the window, unleashing a torrent of white smoke into the space. Daniel had anticipated this very move, swiftly grabbing Lily and guiding her toward the hidden root cellar he'd discovered before, a hidden opening beneath rotted floorboards that led to a natural cave system. Down now, Ranger. Guard. The dog vanished with Lily into the darkness as Daniel guided a weak Kate toward the cellar, her legs giving out. The door splintered inward. Figures in tactical gear poured through the smoke. Daniel met their charge with calculated force. He used the rifle stock like a club, the tight space turning their numbers against them. His body remembered the fight in ways his mind struggled to forget. Pure muscle memory guided strikes that disabled but did not end. He refused to let Lily witness him take a life unless there was no other choice. Kate fired twice before her strength gave way. One shot struck an officer's vest, the impact throwing him backward through the doorway. But there were simply too many. He was just one man protecting two vulnerable souls against a trained, coordinated team. Mark entered last, looking older, with gray now threaded in his beard. He had the same calm competence that once made him a great soldier. Their eyes met through the swirling smoke. Years of shared danger forged an understanding beyond words. Always too stubborn for your own good, Mark said, raising his weapon. But Daniel was already a blur of motion. The rifle stock slammed into Mark's wrist, sending his pistol clattering away. But close-quarters combat was always Mark's specialty. And in that moment, Daniel's injured shoulder failed him. They grappled, crashing hard into the walls. Each man knew the other's moves in a lethal dance they had practiced in a dozen firefights. Mark gained the advantage, his arm locking on Daniel's throat. It was the chokehold that would bring darkness in mere seconds. Daniel's vision began to tunnel. The world was fading at the edges. Then, "Daddy!" Lily's scream tore from the cellar, and Ranger launched himself from the darkness. 90 pounds of controlled fury slammed into Mark's chest. The detective went down hard. Ranger's jaws clamped onto his arm, with a pressure that held but did not crush bone. It was a warning, not an assault. "Everybody stops right now." Kate's voice, impossibly strong, sliced through the chaos. She was propped against the wall. Mark's dropped weapon was steady in her hands, even as her own legs began to tremble. "The next person who moves is done, and I've got nothing left to lose." The tactical team froze their training, at war with their loyalty. Self-preservation was calculating the odds. Mark remained still beneath Ranger blood soaking his sleeve. His face was a mask of pain and something more. Was it shame? Or just recognizing how far he'd fallen from the soldier he once was? "You don't understand." Mark gasped out the words. "It's not just the money. They have something on everyone. My daughter, Emily. She made a mistake at college party. There are photos that would ruin her life. They own me. They own every single one of us. Everyone's got a reason." Kate countered, her own strength obviously fading. "Every criminal believes their excuse makes them different. You chose this, Mark. Every day your silence was a choice," she continued. "The FBI is already on their way." Daniel recognized the bluff in her voice, but he immediately backed her play. "I transmitted everything to their Denver office an hour ago. This USB is just a copy. You can take us all out, but you cannot stop what is already in motion." One of the tactical officers let his weapon dip. "Is that true? Does it even matter another one shot back?" "We came here to handle a cop and a kid. This isn't the job I signed on for." The psychology of the group fractured. Daniel could feel it. That exact moment, a unit's cohesion shatters. These weren't monsters, just cops who'd made terrible choices, who'd justified one small compromise after another until they stood in this desolate ranger station ready to murder innocents. "Stand down," Mark said, his voice a quiet command. "Everyone, stand down, boss. I said stand down." Mark's voice carried the weight of command even from his position beneath Ranger's watchful gaze. "It's over. We are done. weapons lowered hands slowly rising into the air. The cold mathematics of survival had suddenly shifted, favoring surrender over resistance. Yet Daniel held his position, not trusting the sudden capitulation. But Ranger seemed to sense the shift, his powerful jaws finally easing their grip on Mark's arm, though he remained poised to strike again if needed. "You have no idea what you've just unleashed," Mark seethed at Kate. "This goes so much higher than you know. Judges, state officials, people with the power to make problems just disappear. Testifying won't protect you. They will find you, all of you. Then we had better make damn sure it counts," Daniel countered, helping Mark to sit up while his weapon remained trained on him. "Whatever time we have, we make it count." Sirens began to wail in the distance, growing closer with each passing second, undeniably real this time. State police and the FBI converging on the coordinates Kate had miraculously transmitted before they fled the cabin. Mark laughed bitterly, finally understanding that his choices had led him to this moment as inevitably as gravity pulls the world downward. "I am sorry," he said, looking at Daniel with eyes that held the faint echo of the soldier he once was. "I know it means nothing now, but I am sorry. When they threatened Emily, when she needed me, I should have found another way. You would have found another way. I do not know what I would have done." Daniel confessed, his mind flashing to Lily in that cellar, imagining for a moment someone threatening her future. "But I know Maria could never forgive me if I purchased Lily's safety with the suffering of other people." Within just 1 hour, the ranger station was swarming with legitimate law enforcement state troopers, FBI agents, and federal marshals, creating a beautiful, chaotic shield of overlapping jurisdictions that prevented any single entity from burying the story. Kate surrendered the USB drive to a female FBI agent who had battled the blizzard all the way from Denver, starting a chain of custody that would end with prosecutors in Washington. Daniel slumped inside an ambulance, the profound exhaustion hitting him like a physical blow as the adrenaline finally drained away. Lily was a warm presence at his side, her small hand refusing to release his while the ever-watchful ranger lay protectively across their feet. The dog's muzzle was still grimly stained with Mark's blood. Through the ambulance's open doors, they watched as Kate was carefully loaded onto a stretcher, IV lines in place and her skin ghost pale, but her eyes burned with the fierce, undeniable fire of victory. She had done it. Against impossible odds, she had dragged the truth into the light. "Is she gonna be all right, Daddy?" Lily's voice was a weary whisper. "She's a fighter sweetheart. Just like you. Like Mommy was," she added. Daniel held her tight, a kiss on her hair. "Yeah, baby girl. Exactly like she was." The investigation came down like an avalanche building with a quiet force, until it was an unstoppable, roaring power. They arrested Chief Morrison at his house, his wife crying frame up as they carried out boxes of damning proof he'd foolishly kept as leverage against his partners in crime. And in just that first week, 15 officers were indicted. 6 city officials were implicated, and 2 judges were pulled from the bench awaiting investigation. The Cedar Falls Police Department was eventually put under federal oversight, a deep humiliation that would stain them for years. Mark Evans became the prosecution's key witness. His words secured convictions, but not his own redemption. He laid it all bare: names, dates, figures, methods, the full anatomy of a cancer that had rotted Cedar Falls from within. They placed his daughter Emily into protective custody, her future salvaged, if not entirely saved. The damning pictures used for leverage were destroyed by a federal order. Mark ultimately got 15 years in a federal prison, eligible for parole and 7 years for good behavior, a sentence balancing his cooperation with his crimes. Kate fought for 3 weeks in the hospital, an infection threatening to take what the bullets and blood loss had failed to claim. Daniel and Lily came every day bringing her books and puzzles and drawings Lily made of Kate as a superhero, a badge replacing her cape. Ranger waited patiently in the hall, technically not allowed, but the staff, knowing the story, allowed it. His presence was a deep comfort to Kate, who had always had dogs and knew their loyalty was more dependable than most people's. The media swarmed like vultures hungry for a simple hero and villain story for their news cycles. Daniel turned down every interview, threatening to sue any outlet that exposed Lily's identity or where they lived. This wasn't a story for them to profit from, and his daughter deserved to heal from her trauma, without cameras catching every tear. One afternoon, snow still falling past Kate's hospital window, she finally asked the question that had shadowed her recovery. "Why did you do it? You could have just walked away, kept your daughter safe, left me to deal with my own mess. Why risk it all for a stranger?" Daniel chose his words with care, watching Lily read to Ranger in the corner, the dog's tail thumping the floor during the story's dramatic parts. "My wife passed away believing the world could be a better place, that people would do the right thing if given a chance. She was an optimist in ways I've never been, always saw potential where I saw only problems, even when she was dying, and when we knew the treatments weren't working. She made me promise I'd raise Lily that way, to believe in good even when the world proved you wrong. Walking away from you meant breaking that promise. That's a heavy burden to carry, trying to live up to someone's memory." It's not a burden if it makes you a better man than you would have been. Kate was discharged on a Thursday as spring fought to break winter's hold. Ice dripped from pine branches in a syncopated rhythm. Daniel came to pick her up. Lily insisted on joining, giving Kate a handmade card that read, "Thank you for being brave and careful," Lily's 7-year-old voice echoed. "Where will you go now?" Daniel asked as they drove through the changed streets of Cedar Falls, past the police station where federal agents meticulously cataloged the wreckage of a broken trust. "The FBI offered me a job," Kate said quietly. "A consultant on police corruption cases. It seems I've become something of an expert." "That's good. You'll help other towns avoid what we went through here." "Maybe. Or maybe I'll just be a witness to the decay, unable to stop it. Systems resist change, especially when that change threatens power." A heavy silence filled the car, finally broken by Lily's small voice from the back seat. "You could come stay with us. We have plenty of room. And Ranger, he really likes you. And Daddy needs friends who aren't just trees." Daniel felt a warm flush creep up his neck as Kate let out a genuine laugh, the first true sound of joy he'd heard from her since that night in the snow. "That's so sweet." "Lily? But I have to go where this work takes me." "You could visit, though." Lily persisted, her spirit unbroken. "Daddy makes the best pancakes, and in the summer we see bears, and I could teach you to identify all the birds." "I would like that," Kate said, her gaze meeting Daniel's in the rearview mirror. "I would like that a whole lot." She stayed for dinner that night. Nothing romantic, just 3 people and a loyal dog sharing a meal. A small haven as snow fell silently outside. Lily, of course, held court, explaining her intricate theories on everything from why squirrels forget where they bury their nuts to whether angels truly need winter coats. Kate listened with rapt attention, asking questions that made Lily's face glow with importance. After Lily was tucked into bed, Daniel and Kate sat by the fire's warm glow ranger, a comforting weight between them. The silence was a peaceful bond, not a void. "She's remarkable," Kate breathed. "After everything she's witnessed, most children would be shattered. She probably is in ways that will surface later, but she also saw that standing up for something matters, that ordinary people can face extraordinary darkness and survive. That's not a bad lesson, even if the classroom was hell." He turned to her. "What about you? Any regrets about getting pulled into this?" Daniel thought of Mark, facing 15 years in a federal prison, of the officers whose children would now grow up with fathers behind bars, of the community's trust that would take generations to heal. "Ask me again in 10 years when we know if anything really changed, or if it's just a new set of faces running the same crooked game." That's cynical. It's realistic. But Maria, she would say that trying is what matters, even when failure seems certain. That courage isn't about the victory, but about standing firm in the face of probable loss. Kate stood to leave, pausing in the doorway. "For what it's worth, I think Maria would be incredibly proud of the man you've become, of how you're raising Lily." "She'd be proud of you, too," Daniel said, his voice thick with emotion. "For refusing to give up when it would have been so much safer." 3 months later. As summer finally broke through winter's last defiant stand, Kate returned for a visit. She had already testified in 4 grueling trials. Her evidence secured convictions that hadn't just dismantled the Cedar Falls network, but had shattered connected operations in 3 other states. The FBI job was real, based in Denver, but sending her to wherever the rot festered. Lily made good on her promise, dragging Kate on a hike to see an eagle's nest she'd been watching over. As Lily chattered endlessly about fledgling development and hunting tactics, Daniel watched them walk ahead Kate, matching Lily's every step, treating her observations with the deep seriousness they deserved. Ranger, their ever-faithful guardian, scouted the trail beside them, periodically circling back to watch over Daniel, his loyal heart now fiercely guarding Kate as one of their own. That evening, as the sunset bled gold and crimson over the peaks, Lily slept peacefully between them on the porch swing. Kate's voice was quiet. "I bought a cabin. It's just 8 miles away. It needs work, but it's finally mine. I figured I needed an anchor between jobs, a quiet place to remember what this fight is for." Daniel smiled softly. He understood the words she left unspoken. "Lily will be ecstatic. She's been asking about you every 3 days like clockwork. And not just Lily. Ranger's been moping around too." Kate's genuine laugh echoed, her laugh drifting over the meadow as fireflies began their timeless ballet. "Well, we can't have a heartbroken dog." They fell into a peaceful, easy silence as shadows claimed the mountains. 3 souls bound together by the chaos they had survived, but were forging a fragile peace from the wreckage. The deep roots of corruption would take years to unearth. There would be trials, appeals, and veiled threats from the powerful men they'd exposed. But that was a battle for another day. Tonight there was only peace. Justice, they knew, doesn't always flow from the top. It begins in the hearts of ordinary people, brave enough to stand against impossible odds, a reminder that truth will always fight for the light, no matter the personal cost.